Oh, pretty good. Like I said, this news that just came out a couple hours ago definitely, I think changes our plans going into the draft. So it's definitely going to be a very interesting next couple weeks leading up to the big day in late April.
And the news Stan is referring to is the Raiders acquiring quarterback Geno Smith from the Seattle Seahawks for a third-round pick. I mean, Stan, it just seems like earlier this week you and I were talking about the Raiders missing out on their bid for Matthew Stafford. You and I were going over all the free agent quarterbacks, wondering if Shadur Sanders was going to be there at 6 for the Raiders. And now they've got their quarterback for next year. And maybe I was also reading some reports they might be interested in signing Geno Smith to a long-term deal. So let me ask you this. What is your overall reaction to the trade the Raiders made on Friday acquiring Geno Smith?
I think it just goes to show that they're not totally sold on the quarterbacks at the top of the draft or the top rated guys, just because, you're sitting right there, got pick number 7 or pick number 6, or I believe it's 7.
It's 6.
It's 6. I'm sorry. So just off the rip right there, you're in line to get Cam Ward or Shadur, however things are going to work out, just because I think that the second quarterback will still be available at pick number 6, at least in my opinion. So that's what it signifies to me. But nonetheless, we look at the Atlanta Falcons last year, how they signed Kirk Cousins and drafted Michael Penix. So the Raiders could very well have that up their sleeve as well. We just got to go ahead and stay tuned, and it remains to be seen.
Yeah, obviously this reunites Geno Smith with his former head coach Pete Carroll in Seattle. Now Geno is 34 years old. Stan, he's going to make $31 million. He's in the final year of a 3-year deal. The Raiders are on the hook for all that. And I want to read Geno's numbers from a year ago. And Stan, they were pretty impressive. I mean, he completed over 70% of his passes. He threw for a franchise record 4,320 yards, so I was surprised. But then I thought, Russell Wilson's never thrown for that many, but then we got 17 games. So I'm like, okay, that's got to factor in. But all right, the touchdown to interception ratio, not where you'd probably want it. 21 touchdown passes, 15 interceptions. He did help the Seahawks finish with a 10-7 record. So Stan, let me ask you this. Where do you think Geno ranks among 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now?
I would say he's probably somewhere in the bottom part of the top half. I would say somewhere 14, 15, 16, 17, somewhere in that area. He's definitely not at the bottom. He's definitely not 30 or 31 or anything like that. He's not top 5. I would put him probably the bottom part of the first half.
All right, before we get to more on this trade, let's get our promo read in here. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. You got basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your very own home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BLEAV to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game begins. All right, Stan, I read this, in fact, and this is, it blew my mind. I don't know how you'll react to it. This Geno Smith will be the 7th starting quarterback for the Raiders since they decided to move on from Derek Carr in 2022. And Stan, I couldn't name the other 6. I was trying to do it without looking it up. Can you do it?
Let me go ahead and try.
Okay.
You have Jared Stidham.
Yep.
You have has Mariota been one?
No. He was with Derek Carr.
I'm off on that one.
Right.
Let me see here. We got Gardner Minshew.
Yep.
We have Aiden O'Connell.
Yep.
We have, let me see here. No. It wasn't Mario. It was, the one out of Cincinnati a couple years ago, University of Cincinnati. Came over from the Atlanta Falcons.
Yes. That's the one I was missing also.
I forget his name. Ritter. Exactly. So
yeah.
you got Ritter, you got Stidham, you got Aiden O'Connell, you got Gardner Minshew.
There's one tough one. He maybe started 1 or 2 games. It's a tough one.
And I'm just gonna stop right there. I don't feel like.
Desmond Ritter's the one I couldn't remember either. Brian Hoyer, Stan.
Yeah.
I mean, what a list! Oh my goodness. Well, let's see if they finally solve their quarterback dilemma since moving on from Derek Carr. All right, Stan, let me ask you this. This trade clearly is an upgrade for the Raiders over Gardner Minshew and over Aiden O'Connell. But I think it's safe to say that where you rank Geno lower half, maybe 14th or 15th, he's still only the fourth best quarterback in the AFC West. Fair?
Yeah.
Fair?
I think that's a pretty fair statement. Yeah, obviously, Pat Mahomes, you got Herbert, now Bo Nix, and now we got our new guy out of Seattle, and I think that I'd say it's pretty safe. Yeah,
So
Geno Smith. Yeah,
would you go Mahomes, Herbert, Nix, Smith, right?
yes, I would go Mahomes, Herbert, Nix, Geno. Yes.
Okay, so Stan, let me ask you this. So it feels like now at number 6, the Raiders will take the best possible player on the draft board. We still got to see what they do in free agency because we keep talking draft. Well, last time I checked, NFL free agency starts next week. So the Raiders have a ton of cap space to use. So let's see what holes they can fill in free agency. But Stan, let me ask you this. Do you think it will preclude the Raiders from perhaps taking a quarterback in the later rounds?
In the later rounds, no,
Yes.
it doesn't preclude that. They're always going to go ahead and continue to have fresh blood. I think that any good team, if you want to be solidified at the quarterback position, you want to always be drafting new blood. Now, like you just said, the later rounds, something like that, you always want to have a new fresh rookie coming in. That way, who knows? He might pop. He might turn out to really be the goods. So I definitely do not think that closes the door on the Raiders attacking a quarterback in the draft, be it the later rounds rather than the early.
All right, Stan, you've obviously seen a lot of tape or watched a lot of games. You got Will Howard from Ohio State, Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And I thought he was a second or third rounder. I've seen some teams have this guy now in the first round, or some mock drafts, I should say, in the first round. That's Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Would any of those three excite you that you're like, you know what, maybe a third or fourth? Well, the Raiders don't have a third anymore, but a later round pick with any of those guys if they were still on the board. Any of those three excite you?
And you said Will Howard, Jackson Dart, and Jalen Milroe?
Yep.
I think that obviously now with Chip Kelly being the offensive coordinator, he likes quarterbacks that can move.
Yep.
So Jalen Milroe, maybe even a Jackson Dart, maybe I think those would be intriguing just because they're quarterbacks that can move, that they can fit his type of style of play and things like that. I just think that me personally, this draft, I don't see anybody that is someone who is going to automatically be a franchise quarterback. I don't see that right away. Now, like I said, you put them in the right scheme, they got the right players around them, et cetera, et cetera. Who knows what may happen? But as far as this quarterback class, I think that it's really going to remain to be seen as far as will it be the right scheme? Will it be the right play call? Will it be the right situation? Things like that. Maybe a Jalen Milroe just because he can move. Jackson Dart obviously had a lot of hype the early part of the season. Things kind of, tapered off a little bit towards the end of the season, but who knows? I would probably say those two that, you might want to go ahead and possibly take a look at in the middle rounds, something like that.
Stan, let me ask you this. You touched on it a little bit right off the top of the podcast. How much pressure does this take off the Raiders drafting at number 6 if they weren't sold on a Shedeur Sanders and he might be there at 6 for them? Now they can pass because they have Geno Smith, and now they can look at the board and say, okay, we've got our quarterback we feel like moving forward. Now let's just take the best player on the board. Or you still think there's going to be people howling for the Raiders if Sanders was available, even though they weren't sold on him, take him because he could be the quarterback of the future?
I think that it gives some temporary relief just because if you let one of those guys that slips past number 6 and they mess around and go to a team at pick number 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever, and they wind up starting to do well towards the end of the season, and you look up and the Raiders are still at the bottom of the AFC West with the 4th best quarterback looking like they do not know how to get out of their own way, then that's when all of a sudden that's going to come back to bite them. So, yeah, I mean, like the question you're asking, it gives temporary relief only if they wind up going to another team and not doing well as a rookie. But if they just look serviceable as a rookie and look like they have upside leading them down the road in their later years in their NFL career, then yes, it's something that the Raiders will have to answer for. And a lot of Raider Nation will still be up in arms about why they didn't take a quarterback at number 6.
Stan, if you look at the Raiders from what they've done at the end of the final game of the 2024 season to up to right now, I mean, I think it's safe to say this is not business as usual for this franchise. I mean, you got Tom Brady now. You got one of the all-time great coaches in Pete Carroll at the college level and the pro level.
Yeah.
You brought in a Chip Kelly from Ohio State has NFL experience. You trade for a quarterback. You were in the running for Matthew Stafford. I mean, this franchise feels like it actually has some direction and it's not a rudderless ship. Fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement. Still remains to be seen exactly are all the pieces going to come together, just because, obviously they were trying to get Matthew Stafford. Obviously that fell through. Matthew Stafford still with the Los Angeles Rams, et cetera, et cetera. So they go and they try somebody else in the NFC West. Well, Matthew Stafford and Geno Smith, neither one of them is extremely mobile as a quarterback.
Right.
They're both more pocket guys, but they're vastly different. So just off of that alone, it makes you now wonder, are the Raiders simply just going to go get Geno Smith by default? Is it because that they don't believe in Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart at pick number 6? What is the reasoning behind how you go from wanting Matthew Stafford to now going to go get Geno Smith? Is it because you think highly of both of them? Do you feel that Geno was just a default type of pick? Is it because you just don't believe in any of the quarterbacks in the draft? We don't really know those answers, and obviously they'll all come out in the wash, but I'm very interested to see exactly how this entire offseason plays out for the Raiders, who they attack in free agency, who they actually draft, and things like that.
Well, one good thing is, Stan, they locked up Max Crosby long term. I mean, he gets the 3-year extension, and
yes,
historically the Raiders haven't spent that kind of money on defense. It's usually been offense, and now he's the face of the franchise. Agreed?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
And now they've got somebody long term that they could say, hey, Max Crosby's been here. He's been through all the ups and downs with this franchise. He's a cornerstone. Here he is. We've signed him up. We've locked him up long term. So let's hope that's a sign of something to come in free agency, which begins. Stan, let me ask you this. So free agency actually begins Wednesday, but you can actually technically start signing guys Monday. I'm still not sure this 2-day, what the hell this thing is called. I mean,
it's basically just like it's basically a legal tampering period where
legal.
Yeah, free agency opens up on Wednesday when guys can actually sign. So Monday, if you are a pending free agent, and Wednesday is the opening. Monday is when you can negotiate with other teams. And let's say you are just finishing up your contract with the Indianapolis Colts. Well, now on Monday, you can go ahead and start legally communicating with other teams, let's say like the Seahawks or the Rams or the Texans or whoever. They can go ahead, say, hey, well, you know what? We're going to give you X amount of dollars over X amount of years. Well, now you can go back to your team and they tell them, hey, so-and-so just called me. They'll give me X amount of dollars for X amount of years. If you guys want to go and retain me, this is how much it's going to cost because this is what they're offering. So even though they've communicated to you what the terms would be, they can't legally sign you until Wednesday. So your team, your current team, they have 48 hours to go ahead and, scramble and get something together and still be able to go ahead and try to sign you back to an extension without that other team being able to interfere to the point of where you're actually putting pen to paper.
You know what, Stan? We're taping this podcast on Friday night. I'm going to say there's some, quote, deals already done.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Hopefully the Raiders have some done, and we'll find out about them starting on Monday. All right, Raider Nation. Well, we did do the emergency podcast as the Raiders make a big deal. They acquire a starting quarterback, Geno Smith from the Seattle Seahawks, for a 3rd-round pick. That's going to do it for another edition of the Believe in Raiders podcast presented by betonline.ag. For my partner, Stanford Route, I'm Dennis Ackerman. Thanks so much for listening, and may all your punts find the coffin corner. Come on, end.